Welcome to Terror in Tandem, a podcast about finding entertainment in the macabre, hosted by the knowledgeable and lovable Laura and Richard Mathiasen. Each episode, we discuss the horror genre, from books to film to TV and beyond, sometimes even from the beyond. You can find us online at terrorintandem.com and on Instagram at terrorintandem.
Hi.
Hi.
Welcome.
Yeah, the from the beyond knocked my microphone right over.
That's can't be a coincidence. It's a visitation.
Yeah.
Hello, friends.
Hello.
I want to tell you, a confession from me is every time I enter a spooky basement, and we happen to live above one, and I happen to work above one, I call out to the ghosts just to be polite.
Entering your domain.
Yeah, and I, I do like to remind them that I am open to friendships. Let's not get too crazy, but I'm a pretty open-minded person. Maybe you're open
to acquaintanceships.
I am introverted. Let's take this slowly.
Yeah,
don't start by texting me.
Don't bother.
Don't start by riding my body like.
Ew.
No, that's what they call it in Vodun tradition. It's called riding the body.
Oh,
possession.
You just think it's a Vodun in our basement of
yeah.
many. We have so many basements.
We do. All of our properties have basements because where else would the ghosts
Except for our
live?
California ones, because you can't have them there.
No, because you can get earthquaked into one, and that's it. That's it, California Johnny. You had to fucking build a basement. Now you're stuck in one because you got earthquaked into one.
Yeah.
It's a tale as old as time.
Right. Speaking of tales as old as time, maybe we should talk about what this tale of terror is about.
Very excited about this episode because it is, it's a little personal. You're getting a glimpse.
They're all personal.
But you're getting a real glimpse here into the souls.
Yeah, we're going to do a live reading of my
souls.
horror-themed podcast playlist.
This is
script.
Debut episode of my favorite horror movie.
Or just my favorite horror.
Yeah.
Let's just make it a little more general.
To be specific, because this episode
is about
horror
filmatics.
Movie. But maybe another episode will be about a favorite something else. Remember.
Could be shows.
Could be from the beyond.
Could be anything. Could be experiences.
Experiences.
Yeah, like
Goodness.
our
talk about body riding.
Halloween Horror Nights.
Oh my gosh, right.
Yeah.
Or as anyone standing around me called it, watching a grown man scream at people in masks. And
right, at Halloween Horror Nights.
Yeah.
I thought you were talking about just like your everyday COVID.
No, I don't
COVID
walk
times.
around just screaming randomly. I always have a good reason.
Okay, so the premise of this is to talk about I'm going to tell you what my favorite horror is. And listen, we can't pick just one. So that's why my co-host said it was a series.
Yeah.
We're just going to do these episodes when we feel like it.
I feel
it's
like
our podcast.
Anyone
and we'll
who's
make content if we want to.
Anyone who's listened to us or even casually scrolled through the episode lists might have picked up that Terror in Tandem, we're big fans of multi-parters over here. Content.
Well, it's not multi-parters. It's series.
Yes. So much of horror is serialized anyway.
And we want you to keep coming back for more.
And we just love doing what we do.
Sure.
Anyway, my favorite horror. So we're going to talk about our favorite horror movies. We're going to interview each other. I'm excited about this. It brought back a lot of really fun memories for me. And also in doing some of the deep dive research, I learned something about a movie that has not only been my favorite horror movie since I saw it, it's been my favorite movie since I saw it.
Well, since you're already started, why don't we start with your favorite horror? What's your favorite horror, Richard?
Really? Me? So, my favorite horror movie is 1973's classic The Exorcist, directed by William Friedkin and written by William Peter Blatty, who also wrote the novel. I get it. The Exorcist is probably at the top or near the top of basically every list you've ever Googled of best horror movies ever made. I understand. I'm not trying to be original here, but this is legit my favorite movie. I know it's a joke from Beetlejuice. I totally agree with him. It gets funnier every single time I see it. No, actually, it gets scarier. It's a movie.
I still haven't seen Beetlejuice.
What? Wait, stop.
Listen,
Hold
we've
on.
already recorded this. We've already recorded this part.
You've never seen Beetlejuice?
We've already recorded this experience. This is
Really?
deja vu. Yeah. Much like Beetlejuice, right?
So we're watching Beetlejuice, but that's another thing. So The Exorcist is my favorite horror movie. Absolutely.
Why?
Okay. I'm going to premise this.
Why don't you tell me first when you saw it?
I'm
Because you weren't
gonna
born
tell you,
when it came out.
No, I was not. This
Well,
was made.
You might have been and then
This was made
sacrificed and then
many,
born
many,
again.
many couple of several years ago before I was born. So I wasn't around for the absolute cultural fuckathon that was this movie's release. And I'll get into that a little later. It's bananas. I mean, you really don't see shit like this anymore when a movie comes out, and it's kind of a bummer because it's wild. But I want to premise this. I just want to start saying that some of the story I'm about to tell might come across as a bit dark, and I want to assure the listener that I'm cool, I'm fine, and there's no way for me to tell the story without including some of the darkness, and it's just an integral part of it, so roll with it, okay?
And it's a horror-themed podcast.
Yes.
So
Anyway.
have you listened
now,
to our commercials?
I was raised in a what I would generously call fanatically Roman Catholic family. I mean, the real, like, old school hardcore kind, like Latin masses and beating the shit out of each other. So this movie was spoken about in my family in hushed tones, with a sense of even discussing it was dangerous. And I remember the only thing my mom ever told me about it was that it was dangerous, evil, and that she walked out of the theater within like the first couple of minutes.
Why would she go to see it?
I'll get into that.
Okay.
So, obviously,
I would never, ever imagine.
Became completely fascinated with this movie. What could possibly be this powerful that it could freak out my parents? Because I was still not even a teenager at this point. I was preteen, so my parents were, mythical. They were big. They were invulnerable and strong. So this thing that had caused them so much fear was an instant fascination to me. So I watched it. Not only was I very young when I first watched it, I was also very, very Catholic because most kids are the religion that their parents
How old were you when
force
you
them
saw
to be.
it?
When I first saw it, I was 10. I was not allowed to watch R-rated movies.
On purpose? How did you see it?
I snuck a VHS copy
How?
from the older brother of a friend of mine, which isn't that the way that most people of our generation were introduced to the coolest things in our lives, from like the shithead older brother of a friend of ours?
I mean, I would imagine it would have been like some other type of movie, but okay.
No, it was just a VHS.
Yep.
Oh, obviously, that's also how I saw other types of movies.
Sure.
Yes, I am of the generation that most rad things in my life were
Usually it's magazines.
introduced. Yes.
In like a clubhouse.
Also smokable things.
Okay, so did you watch it alone?
I did. I watched it alone.
You had a VCR in your room?
No.
Okay. You waited for your parents to go to sleep?
I did. I waited for my parents to go to sleep, and I went downstairs to the living room, and I watched it very, very close to the TV because I didn't have headphones or anything, so I had to keep it pretty low, but I wanted to hear what was going on. So I watched the whole thing, and it scared me very badly because it is a genuinely scary movie. I've seen many, many, many times, easily in the double digits by now.
And nobody caught you?
So, I totally got caught by my mom. I, couldn't get anything by her. So what ended up happening, and this is what really made the movie stick with me, which I don't think was the original intent, is my mom told me that by defying her and watching this movie, I had broken the fifth commandment, honor thy father and mother, and exposed my soul to demonic possession, the possibility of demonic. So basically, like all the nasty, horrible shit I just watched happen to poor Linda Blair, I was now at risk of. And remember, I was very Catholic, and this was a real possibility for me in my 10-year-old mind. So this gave me years and years of nightmares. But haha, joke's on you. I fucking love being scared. So flash forward many years later, this has been my favorite movie since the fucking day I saw it.
So it's not just about the actual film.
No,
it's about the defiance of it.
I'll get into the actual film, but I would be disingenuous if I didn't say I am heavily, heavily biased towards this film because of the manner in which I was introduced to it. It was talked up.
When did it shake your Catholicism of it all?
Oh, I lost my Catholicism in my teen years, but I never lost my fear of this movie, and that continues to this day. I recently rewatched it, and my heart still beats faster during certain parts, despite not believing anymore, and despite literally being able to recite the entire fucking movie by heart at this point.
So, what is your favorite scene of the film?
Listen, it's definitely a movie that has its shocking moments, but it's a sum of its parts. The reason it works so well is because all elements of it are flawless. Its pacing, its characters, what went into it. I mean, my favorite part, one of my favorite parts of the movie is a scene that was cut from the initial run of the movie because you couldn't, William Friedkin couldn't figure out a way to get the wires out of the shot. And it wasn't until a re-release of the film when they used CGI to get rid of the wires, and it's the backwards crab walk down the stairs that Reagan does. I remember when they re-released it, I saw it in the theater. They did another theatrical run. I jumped so fucking far out of my seat, because I'd never seen that part of the movie before. It had never been shown. And holy shit. But my favorite parts of the movie, I think, my favorite overall part of the movie, and what really I think makes this stand out, is it's the only body of pop culture that I've ever seen that really, really gets the idea, or the Roman Catholic idea of the devil. Now, the devil is always depicted as like a monster. And the thing about the Catholic version of the devil is he used to be an angel named Lucifer, the most beloved, the most beautiful. And Lucifer's big beef with God is mankind. The fact that God created us after he created the angels, and that he loves us so much, I guess. Now, Lucifer's whole deal wasn't raining fire on mankind or doing all the sorts of shit you see in dumb movies. It was basically playing the long game with God and proving to God that his creation, his beloved, wonderful creation, was a pile of shit. So Lucifer's whole deal was like, when you read about possession in the New Testament, it was always filthy. There were always people covered in excrement and dirt, spouting obscenities and exposing themselves and doing horrible things, because the point was to drag God's creation through the mud. Now, this movie takes a beautiful, innocent, sweet little girl and desecrates her. Now, the legendary makeup effects artist responsible for this, Dick Smith, who received an honorary Oscar, late in life for his overall body of work, his purpose in this movie, he said he didn't want to create a monster. He thought that would be stupid. He wanted to show the degradation of flesh. What would happen to a real person if they were corrupted in this way? So he spent months studying gangrene and
like flesh-eating
burn
disease,
wounds,
yeah.
and wow, what a cool job.
Yuck.
Yum. So yeah, that's
Oh,
why
you said yum and I said yuck.
I'm just starving after thinking of all that pus.
What do you think was the least successful part of this film?
Absolutely nothing. There is nothing wrong with this movie. I've seen it 20 plus times. I've gone over every inch of this movie. There's nothing I would fix, change, replace. It's perfectly constructed from start to finish. It is a meticulously crafted, researched work of art. Now, actually, if I may, I want to get into that for a second.
I have a couple more questions.
I have answers for those.
Well, you might not. Do you remember a time, because you went to Catholic school?
I sure did.
And you went, and also to church?
Yeah, and it made me really normal.
Well, did you remember any time when they spoke about the movie openly?
Me? No, because I came up in the, late 80s and 90s, which is way, way, way past. By the time I was a teenager, they were focused on like Dare and that kind of bullshit.
Do you know, historically when the movie came out, if the Catholic Church came out against it?
That's complicated.
Or the Pope at all?
So I love that you asked me that, because that's a big, big part of this movie. The Catholic Church had a very complicated reaction to this movie. Now,
because it doesn't shine a bad light on priests.
Not at all.
Actually, if anything, they're the heroes of the movie.
So this I want to say first, this is based on the novel.
And also like the actual belief in Christ and all of the like practices of being religious is sort of the savior of her, ultimately, of her soul, right?
So yes, what ends up saving her is not, well, what ends up saving Regan in the end is when Father Karras sacrifices himself willingly, which is what Christ did to save mankind. It's not an act of divinity, it's an act of humanity, which is the grace that is unique to mankind, that only mankind had. Angels, seraphim, cherubim, all of God's other creations, none of them have that. And that is why they win. And that is why Regan is brought back to normal. It's because of the very human knowing. I mean, Father Karras commands the demon to enter him, fully knowing what's going to happen, and then kills himself. Well, that gets complicated. There's a sequel. But this, I want to say, is based on the novel, and it's because both the screenplay and the novel were written by William Peter Blatty. It's a very faithful adaptation of the book, but this is ostensibly based on a true story. The 1940s possession of a young man who was named Roland Doe. It's not his real name because he was a minor when this happened, but it was such a famous case of possession. And the whole scene in The Exorcist of the doctors recommending that they seek out a Catholic priest, that was the case of Roland Doe. They couldn't find a medical reason for the phenomena surrounding him, so they said, for psychological purposes, bring an exorcist in. And they did, and it worked. And this person who was they never discovered what his real name was, apparently went to have like a full life and was a NASA engineer or something.
I wonder what he thought of the movie.
Yeah. Well, anyway,
I'm sure he doesn't remember anything that happened.
The Catholic Church officially sanctioned this movie. I mean, they were very supportive. The president of Georgetown, who was a Jesuit priest, gave William Friedkin access to the priest who performed the exorcism on Roland Doe, to the diaries left behind. So they helped support the making of this movie, to the point that Father Dyer, the priest friend of William Karras, of Damien Karras in the movie, was played by an actual Roman Catholic priest, Father William O'Malley. That's like the most Catholic name ever. His one and only film role. He's the one who holds his hand as he's dying and gives him his last rites. Yeah, he was a real priest, not an actor. So the Catholic Church was very, very in favor of this movie. And this brings me to why my mom went to see it. It's because some people, like the Cardinal of New York, where my family's from, were extremely supportive of this movie. Now, exorcism is a big part of the New Testament. It's a big part of Jesus's story. And as you mentioned, the priests in this movie are the fucking superheroes. They win the day. Yeah. They defeat evil. And Chris, played by Ellen Burstyn, my favorite actress, and just still doing her thing, rocking it. Also, Requiem for a Dream should have won an Oscar for that.
Every time you bring that
should have won an Oscar for that. Anyway, Now, in the movie, Chris McNeil is an atheist. She doesn't believe any of this stuff. She begs the priests to help her because she wants to save her girl. This movie is also an example that Christ looks out for all of us. It's not about the rites that some medieval monk made up in an abbey. It's about love and what Jesus actually taught, what was written in the New Testament of the Bible. So the Catholic Church was really supportive, and they would take full congregations to see this movie, which is how my mom ended up in the theater, and I guess she walked out. She was pretty pissed. So I want to mention, when this movie came out...
Or scared. I mean...
Yeah. When this movie came out, other cardinals, such as the Cardinal of Boston, came out very firmly against it, saying, you know, and a lot of right-wing politicians used the whole, like, save the children kind of bullshit of this is corrupting America. There were conspiracy theories that the ratings board had given it an R rating instead of an X rating so that they could lure children to be into the theaters to be corrupted by the devil. You know, not a lot has changed since 1973.
I mean, it's not like the enticement. What's the enticement
I don't
of the
know.
devil here?
Watching the devil get his ass kicked by an old guy. That's one other thing I want to mention. There's so much trivia about this movie. I mean, if you really want to blast the 2010 DVD commentary.
Well, before you say that, I have a question.
Yeah.
Another one. What is your favorite reimagining or remaking or, you know, experience that you've had besides this one?
What do you mean?
Regarding The Exorcist.
Well, I mean,
did you read the book before you saw the movie?
No. I saw the movie first. Yeah,
and then
absolutely.
read the book?
I read the book. Now, The Exorcist is a franchise, which is weird. And the thing is boy, are they hit or miss. The second movie, directed by John Borman, is just flat out bad, but it is worth a watch because it's really, really weird, and it has Louise Fletcher and James Earl Jones in it.
What about the stage play?
There's the stage play that you and I saw in Los Angeles with Brooke Shields and that guy who played the mayor from season 3 of Buffy.
Yeah.
Not great. So there's the third movie, which was actually directed by William Peter Blatty. Also it's a direct sequel to the first movie. It's based on his own book, Legion, which was the sequel to the book, and it's pretty good. Now, unfortunately, at that point, Legion A. Cobb had passed, so fortunately, George C. Scott stepped into the role of Lieutenant Kinderman and really knocks it out of the park. And Brad Dourif plays the demon that's possessing Damien Karras, so it's really good, actually. It's not like the first movie. It's a very different animal, but it's pretty decent. Then very famously in 2004, 2005, they made another movie. It was a prequel. Now, Rennie Harlan directed that one, and it was called Exorcist: The Beginning, and it was bad. It starred Stellan Skarsgård, father of the 8 billion Skarsgård actors, as a young Father Merrin, first confronting the demon. It's not good. So the studio released a recut version directed by none other than Paul Schrader, called The Exorcist Dominion. And it's also very, very bad. So that was an interesting time. I remember that. 2 Exorcist movies starring the same actors, basically the same plot with some differences, and both of them being kind of shitty. So then there was the Fox series that went for 2 seasons starring Gina Davis and John Cho that was actually, I'm not kidding, really good. It was a fucking shame they canceled it because it was awesome. And then, of course, we have the upcoming reboot that David Gordon Green is doing with Ellen Burstyn, and I gotta say, I am...
and Leslie Odom Jr.
And Leslie Odom Jr. I'm not looking forward to it. I hope it's good. I do, but comments by the director, the lack of involvement of William Friedkin in any way, and the recent trailer just don't have me very stoked about it. It looks about as far away from the original movie as you could possibly get. So, anyway, now... the last thing I really want to talk about in this movie, first off, you can't talk about William Friedkin without mentioning that he is undeniably a brilliant director, one of my favorites. Ellen Burstyn generously describes him as a maniac. So, on the set of this film, she quite famously almost became paralyzed, hurt her back so badly during a scene, but it was so authentic that it made it into the movie. So there's a scene where she falls and cries out in pain, and it sounds really realistic. It's because she severely injured her back. He would frequently fire guns or slap his actors across the face right before calling action to get authentic reactions out of them. And this is the days before CGI, so all those scenes where you can see people's breath? Well, it's because the set was refrigerated for days on end, making it quite an unpleasant experience. But the thing I really, 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 really want to talk about here is Mercedes McCambridge. Now, Mercedes McCambridge is a name you may never have heard before, and that's a real shame, because she is the voice of Reagan when she's possessed. Now, when Reagan sounds all fucked up, that's not Linda Blair. That is Mercedes McCambridge. Okay. Now, Mercedes McCambridge was an Academy Award-winning actor who, at this point in her life, had been through some shit and had gotten back on the wagon, gotten her life back on track, thanks, largely in part, to the Catholic Church. She credited religion. Now, she used to do stage plays with Orson Welles and radio dramas back in the day, and William Friedkin remembered her voice, so he asked her if she would be interested. She read the script, and she approached William Friedkin and gave him a long speech about how she used to be an alcoholic, and she put her life back together because of the Catholic Church. And she said, after reading the script, she knew two things. She had to do this movie, and in order to do this movie, she would have to start drinking and smoking and do terrible things to herself again.
That's sad.
And she wanted William Friedkin to know that it was her choice and that he couldn't stop her if he tried. And he was pretty weirded out by that, but said sure. So she also had one other demand, that was to have two of her friends who were Roman Catholic priests with her in the sound booth at all times.
She suffered from bronchitis for her whole life, which led her to the breathing troubles.
Now, in order to get
that she had in the movie,
in order to get the very distinct raspy voice, she would smoke constantly, drink right before, and then eat raw eggs to get really mucusy and gurgly sounding. And in the vomiting scenes, she would actually make herself throw up. And after the takes were done, apparently she was so emotionally destroyed by this, she would just literally collapse, and her priest friends would carry her off the set, emotionally broken and sobbing.
How sad that, she's not even a conversational
and she
piece
demanded
of the film.
demanded to do this movie. Every time William Friedkin talked about it, how uncomfortable everyone was watching this woman destroy herself to do this role. She felt it was a calling to do it, that this movie needed to be seen, that this story needed to be told, but put herself through fucking hell. And I mean, when I read about the extent, that I'm not even really getting into everything, because honestly, it gets darker. She tortured herself voluntarily to do this.
Yeah.
And it's difficult for me because, quite honestly, it's a brilliant career-defining performance. But after learning the things that this poor woman went through,
do you know she wasn't originally credited for her voice work in this film?
I do know that.
And she appealed to SAG, and they, when a new print was made, her name was in the credits.
Pretty fucked up.
Yeah.
Pretty fucked up.
Especially after everything she went through.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, but everybody talks about, when Marlon Brando got fat. That's really hard to do. Take it from somebody who's done it a few times. It's not that hard to do. Anyway.
Well, that's
had to talk about
exciting.
her.
That's not exciting.
The other part of that is all of that was done in post, obviously. So all the horrible, horrible things that you hear possessed Linda Blair say first had to be said by 14-year-old Linda Blair, which was so shocking to Max von Sydow that it frequently made him forget his lines.
Yeah.
Hearing this little girl say the things that she said. Now, another thing about Max von Sydow, he's only 44 in this movie.
Wow, he looks like much older.
That took 4 hours a day of makeup, and for the rest of his career, he had trouble convincing casting directors of his actual age, especially outside of Sweden.
Didn't Linda Blair fracture her spine too?
Ellen Burstyn fractured her spine. Linda Blair hurt herself, and I am sorry to say, was quite scarred from this movie. A lot of elements of this movie were pretty traumatic, and unfortunately, the attention this role brought her was problematic.
Yeah.
As you can imagine, she was bothered for the rest of her life by disgusting men and the ultra-religious disgusting men. So that was fun. But it's still my favorite movie because it is absolutely terrifying. As I said earlier, it cerebrally gets the concept of the Roman Catholic Satan more than anything else. It's not just jump scares and flying off the bed, although this movie did start 50 years of copycats, including its own sequels. But if you want to know what William Friedkin himself believes, he doesn't know. He says, when asked, maybe, approached it as a believer. He said, I think a lot of the reason the movie works is because I went into it as a believer. I thought it was important that this movie not be made by a cynical person. But he quotes Hamlet saying, there are more things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in your philosophy. And I think that's a pretty decent place to land. I know as much as you do, which is fucking nothing. None of us know anything. Anybody claiming otherwise is making it up.
William Blatty originally wanted Stanley Kubrick to direct.
Yes, there were actually a lot of differences. Stanley Kubrick was approached to direct.
And he said, I'd only like to develop my own stuff.
Yep. Now, this movie was originally going to star Jack Nicholson and Marlon Brando, but William Friedkin said he didn't want it to be like just a vehicle for big stars. You cast Brando in a movie, it becomes a Marlon Brando movie, right. Which he's got a point. And honestly, I can't picture anybody else other than Jason Miller and Max von Sydow, R.I.P. to both of you kings. Jason Miller was primarily a playwright. He only acted in a few things, and most of it on the stage, and wrote his own stuff. So at one point, Jamie Lee Curtis was considered, but Janet Leigh, her mother, forbade her from being in this movie for obvious reasons. And as a mom, good call. That kind of fucked up poor Linda Blair. William Friedkin recounts talking to Linda Blair, who had read the novel, and talking to her mother and saying, do you understand the scene with the crucifix? And I think we'll all know which one I'm talking about. And Linda Blair saying like, yeah, I get it. It's like jerking off, right? And William Friedkin being like, well, and, to the mom, are you sure you're okay with this? And obviously had to sign all sorts of parental consent and things like that. But Linda Blair's amazing parents were totally fine with it. So I guess.
They brought her to the audition without an appointment or anything.
Yeah. And listen, Linda Blair crushes it. She's incredible.
Do you want to tell everyone what the name of the demon is?
It's never mentioned in the movie. It's mentioned in other movies, but if you know the statue, it's clearly the Demon of the Wind, Pazuzu, Arch-Lord of Hell. Yeah, in the Middle Ages, here's the thing. When you put a bunch of monks inside a cold building and you say, live here all your life with no women, and they're going to do a couple things. They're going to invent alcohol and write down really fucked up stories about weird lore and sci-fi and fantasy. I don't know if you've noticed that about men, but if you leave them alone, they get real nerdy and drunk. So that's basically why you've got all these pantheons of archlords and demons, and why it so closely resembles medieval monarchical structures. Like you've got kings of hell, princes of hell.
Think about contemporary, Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, exactly.
All of those worlds of Warcraft.
This is OG D&D. Yeah. It's a bunch of nerds in a building, no women anywhere, no lives. All you do is pray all day and make wine and write very slowly in leaves of parchment with fancy inks. So they invented kings of hell and princes of hell and archlords, and they gave them all power. So this is Pazuzu, Demon of the Wind. And Pazuzu comes back many, many times to taunt the poor McNeil family and all that shit in a bunch of sequels that aren't really worth watching. But that's never mentioned. Oh, one last thing, real quick. You know that demon face that pops up in certain frames of the movie?
Yeah. And
scares the fucking Christ out of you? That was actually a screen test for original makeup they were going to use for Reagan. But they rejected it because, as I mentioned earlier, Dick Smith wanted to show actual Linda Blair, like, really looking like herself if she was all fucked up. Not some, like, completely different looking demon thing. He wanted a little girl covered in like sores and lesions.
Yeah.
Which I think we can all agree was pretty effective. Oh, the pea soup, the vomit, that's pea soup. And the reason Jason Miller looked so shocked, horrified, and disgusted was it was supposed to hit him in the chest.
Yeah.
And it hit him in the face and the mouth, and he got a mouthful of pea soup in his face.
You can visit the staircase in Washington, D.C.
Yes, you can. It's a very real staircase in Georgetown.
Actually, it just appeared in the
visited.
Film Ghosted as Captain America and Ana de Armas race each other up the stairs.
Yeah, it's been in a bunch of movies. I've been there. It's pretty cool. It is a very long, steep flight of stairs, and I imagine...
Yeah, but not as long and steep as John Wick Part 4.
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
Okay. Let's take a little side note.
Let's take a break, and then maybe I can speak.
Do you want to talk a little bit about the 40 minutes of Keanu Reeves falling downstairs?
No, I want to talk about my favorite horror, because I thought this was Terror in Tandem, not Terror by Wondom.
Let's take a break. Nothing beats a warm bowl of soup for those days when you're not quite feeling yourself, am I right? Well, the demons wearing your body like a rotting meat suit may be legion, but there's only one thing they're craving on an excellent day for an exorcism. Why not treat yourself, and everyone inside you, to Reagan's Home-Style Pea Soup? Every serving of Reagan's Home-Style Pea Soup contains all the nutrients both your body and the archlords of hell inhabiting it need to survive another night chained to your bed. Holy water burning your skin? Well, not only is every bowl of Reagan's Home-Style Pea Soup delicious and filling, but it's also a salve for divine burns on your corrupted flesh. Rub a little pea soup on it, my dad used to say. And my dad was the devil, so he would know. Reagan's Home-Style Pea Soup is designed to be absorbed quickly, so don't worry about artillery barfing all over those mean old priests. Your hideous human flesh will still feel satisfied, no matter how much of it ends up on your mom and that priest you might have, but definitely did just kill with your mind. Reagan's Home-Style Pea Soup. Just like your mother used to make before she sucked in hell. This is a fake ad for a fake product on a horror-themed podcast. We do not condone nor endorse becoming possessed by demons and murdering exorcists, no matter what your mother does in hell. Ooh, oh, baby, we're back from break.
So, I'll just jump right into my favorite movie.
What is
My
it?
favorite horror.
What is it? I bet it's good.
It's a 2014 film, It Follows, which I know I've mentioned many times. Well, now I'm going to talk about it in depth.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have good taste here at TNT.
Very different than Richard's offering. Written and directed by David Robert Mitchell. He most recently wrote and directed Under the Silver Lake with
Andrew Garfield.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it stars Micah Monroe, who we love on this podcast. She was in Watcher. She stars as the character named Jay. And Jake Weary as Hugh, who is in all of seasons of the TV series Animal Kingdom.
Based on the amazing movie.
Yeah. It's a crazy
with Jackie Weaver
show.
and Ben Mendelsohn.
Yeah. But that's not in the TV show.
No, but the movie's fucking dope.
It stars some other folks too. One of the actors who plays the character of Paul was actually in this TV series on Netflix, Atypical, where he plays
Right. Yeah.
a character on the
recognized
spectrum.
that
Yeah.
dude.
Yeah.
Fuck.
Really great.
Yeah.
Really great in that show, and also as like sort of this like somewhat pathetic puppy
He's a
dog.
little hangdog.
Yeah, he's a hangdog.
Yeah. Like the best
but he's
friend
been
syndrome.
He's
Yeah.
always been their friend. So just a brief synopsis. Jay is a young woman who lives with her sister and her mother in a random neighborhood in a random town.
Patriot Eagle America.
And she is infected with a curse, which presents an unstoppable entity from following her relentlessly. And its goal is to catch and kill her. And the only way she can save herself is by passing the curse on to another. And this is passed through sexual intercourse.
Which, as we all know, is the worst possible thing a woman can do.
Or a man.
Curse deserved. No, women. Only women aren't allowed to have sex.
No,
or
because there's
sexual
plenty of
desires,
men that
or
have.
sexual beliefs. Obviously, someone's never read the Bible.
Hugh gives it to her. Actually, she
does.
loses her virginity to him, and it's a very sweet and innocent moment that she's having, sort of thinking about what her first time would have been like. She's laying in the car and playing with these little baby daisies, laying face down in the back seat, and he crawls on top of her and chloroforms her. And you're like, wait a minute, this is weird, because they had already had sex. So usually the chloroform comes first.
I mean, in my experience, sometimes it comes right in the middle of it.
I'm going to get into some of the directorial influences that sort of come into play here. But basically, she has to either continue to outrun this entity, or once it touches you, it's going to kill you. The monster has no name. It can take the face of anybody, the face and body of anybody. And nowhere are the origins known. Like, we don't ever find out the origin story of it, which is really awesome.
I agree.
And also how it came to exist in the first place. There's nothing. There's
We don't learn anything about this monster other than
you don't need to.
Be afraid of it. That's it. Be afraid.
One of my favorite parts of the movie itself is the atmosphere that the filmmaker creates. It's very ambiguous as to when this takes place. You don't know. I mean, they're watching old TVs and you know, they don't have cell phones, but a character reads from like a modern, what looks like a e-reader. Like, it looks like a little compact, or like what you would have birth control pills in, and it's an e-reader.
Yeah, it's like a deliberately constructed alt-earth almost.
But it's so relatable and real.
Which is great,
and
because
tangible, and
you can watch this
special.
movie at any time and it doesn't seem out of place.
It was filmed in Detroit, and it was filmed in the middle of winter, but they have to experience a lot of like summer time, so it's really interesting. You don't actually see their breath, like
tropical Detroit. Well, listen, hold up. Before you go any further with this, why this movie? What has made this one, which is a pretty recent entry, stick with you?
Well, one is the atmosphere that it creates. The director said that he was influenced by many famous directors, but one of his ultimate favorite directors is John Carpenter.
Which is real obvious in this one.
It's really obvious. And also Hitchcock, which when Hugh chloroforms Jay, he ties her to a wheelchair and brings her to this sort of abandoned building. And he constantly is wheeling her back and forth to show like this encroaching entity. And that was it felt very Rear Window to me. The whole movie felt very Rear Window, because it was like you're constantly watching for something to happen, but something is actually still watching you.
And she's constantly trying to convince people of something that only
That's
she
the
has
other
witnessed.
reason I like it, you know, like it and hate it, and why it scares me is when you know something to be true, but you cannot convince anybody that it is. And she is gorgeous. She's so pretty, and like known to be pretty in this group of people in the film. And so it feels like, okay, you can pass it through sex. So it's a very confusing thing, because she does end up having sex with some other people, but what is it about? Is it they want to have sex with her, like this best friend Paul, the neighborhood tryhard Paul? He offers to take this from her, but she's basically questioning his motives, like, why? Just finally you can get in my pants. I mean, ultimately she does, because she's desperate. Also, one of the things is they're just young adults. They don't know what they're doing. You know, so many times in horror movies, we see young adults really putting together these very complicated puzzles of how this came to be. You know, they don't try to figure out its source. They don't try to figure out like how they can stop it. They come up with like a really ridiculously stupid idea that they think might have worked, and even we as the viewer, we think maybe it might have worked, and the ending leaves it very ambiguous. So it still could be following them.
It's also pretty dark.
Yeah, it still could be following them.
Yeah.
It's sort of like the spinning top at the end of
Their
Inception. It is really
solution-
for the viewer to make their mind up as to whether or not it's still following. What I also like
It's also
is the
very
complicated web that this passing of the entity involves, because that's where the real humanity of it all comes into play. You are basically giving this to someone else through a very intimate and personal act. So you have to have a little bit of, you know, physical trust and maybe emotional trust even. It's a psychological and physical connection to have sex with someone. But you knowingly are passing this, something that could ultimately kill them. And one of the really interesting parts, and why this is like such a hanger on as far as the fear of it, if it kills the last person that you passed it to, then it's still coming for you. Like, it continues to go down the line. And, you know, you can take that as a commentary on all kinds of things. If you want to think about like sexually transmitted diseases, or you represent everybody who the person you've had sex with has had sex with, all that. But I think more literally, it's about you making that decision to put somebody's life at risk. Knowingly
Definitely.
Put someone's life at risk.
It's psycho. It's like having sex with somebody and then handing them the VHS to the Ring.
Yeah.
You know, like knowing that, having that thought in your head and then engaging in sexual activity with somebody is cold to a degree I can't even imagine. Like, that is fucked up.
One of the, when I talk about atmosphere, I also want to talk a little bit about how the movie was filmed. It uses two very distinct filmmaking techniques: wide angle shots and long takes. And that really adds to the element of horror and like eeriness of the film. I would say it's not jump scare. It's not, it's like this slow pursuit. The director said that he wanted to place the viewer and the audience within the world, and it meant to pace it very slow so that it would take as long as it takes.
Yeah.
You know?
Because the demon never runs.
No, but they never stop
Never
either.
sleeps, never stops.
And
Nothing
they can find you
stop
anywhere.
It. Yeah, yeah. And it, oh man. Can you talk about one scene in particular?
Well, I'll get there.
Okay.
The director, Robert David Mitchell, also said that
Not Mitchell, Robert David?
no, he didn't want it to be a telling of something dangerous is approaching. That's why he uses the long shot, is because we can see the danger approaching.
Oh, yeah.
And the one scene that I do want to talk about is when they're finally sort of like at the end of their town on the beach. They're all sitting around, and Micah Monroe's character of Jay is basically sitting facing the camera as we see this entity approaching from behind. And because no one else can see the entity unless you've been infected, she's the only one that sees it. And as her hair starts to lift up, she realizes that she's been grabbed by this thing.
Yeah.
And
we can see
really
it coming.
Incredible. Yes.
Yeah.
But then we don't see it. When the hair is being held, we don't see the entity anymore.
It switches perspectives to her friend, so it just looks like she's being invisibly lifted aloft.
But then Paul tries to like help, and he gets thrown aside and gets like this terrible burn mark on his stomach. So then he starts to believe that it's happening, but all of the other ones, all the other friends are, and her sister, they believe her automatically. The girls believe her. The other guy in the story that she ends up having sex with in the hospital after she's sort of in a car wreck running from this thing, still doesn't believe her. She gives him the entity. It takes the form of his mother. His mother fucks him to death. And that's it. Then this entity takes the form of him and starts to follow her again. So it's really...
If at first you don't succeed, fuck again.
The wide angle sort of gives you this, background, like the background, wide expanse of background. Like, again, where we talked about the cabin in the woods trope, it's like nowhere to run, but everywhere to run.
So many movies are praised for their sense of claustrophobia and for keeping the angle tight, keeping the characters constrained or trapped to, like enclosed locations. And this does the opposite. This is showing the whole scene, a wide angle shot, a long tracking shot. You can see everything coming. The fear is not in you can't see it coming. It's in you can't stop it.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter that you can see it. Like, what's scarier, an enemy you can't see?
Even
or
if you
one
give it to someone else, that doesn't mean that person's going to survive, because Hugh did the chloroform to tell her, to help her be informed. She has to give it away.
That's a really creepy scene when he's like telling her all the rules and shit.
He didn't set her up, and these are just rules that he sort of learned on his own.
Great guy, by the way.
Yeah, but I mean, the opening scene, which is definitely Halloween inspired, was done in one long shot. The camera panned around the circle in the street. They didn't have expensive equipment, so like the camera movements and the camera actually had to like follow the actress running in and out of her house. And we are the observer of everything that's happening, and we don't know what's happening. And then she goes to this beach. She sits there, basically says goodbye to her dad on the phone, and then the lights flash on, and it's the next day, and she's all broken up and dead. Yeah. And we don't even know what's happening. Also, one thing is it follows the title never comes until the very end of the film.
Nice.
Which I thought was really
I like that. That's an old classic. I was so happy that you rewatched this recently, because I had forgotten personally how dope the score to that movie is.
Well, speaking of the score, that was written, composed by Rich Vreeland, who goes by the name Disaster Piece.
Nice.
Which we've talked about, and he also recently did the music for Bodies, Bodies, Bodies.
Oh, good. It's amazing, and it's very Carpenter-esque.
It is. And the film is named Jay. The main character is named Jay in homage to Jamie Lee Curtis.
Ah, perfect.
And the slow, terrifying pace of the entity is reminiscent of Michael Myers stalking victims.
Also, Jason.
Yeah.
Jason never runs.
Right.
Unless you're watching the 2009 remake, in which he does.
We also see when Jay is sort of staring out the window in her classroom and sees the entity outside. That's a nod to Halloween.
Yeah.
One interesting thing about this film is the character of Yara. She's reading Dostoevsky on this little tiny reader, and she's constantly quoting from it. And one of the most sort of critical quotes that she reads is, "Your soul will leave your body and you will no longer be a person, and that is certain. The worst thing is that is certain." And so this is really, I think, the reason why they don't end up killing the entity, that it's never ending.
No, it can't be killed, I think. I don't think it can be.
Well, I mean, that's the interesting part of it is it's really up to interpretation, but that is my interpretation. The tall man. I wanted to talk about the tall man.
Thank you.
So there is a scene where she has everybody sleeping over her house. Her mother is basically a passed out alcoholic, and her father only makes 2 appearances, one in a photograph and one, I'll tell you where in a minute.
A real Nightmare on Elm Street style mom.
Yeah, she is no help. So they're all sleeping over, and she sees something. She sees someone in her kitchen. She runs upstairs. She closes herself in the bedroom. Finally lets the other folks in except for Yara. Yara knocks at the door and she opens it, and it's just her standing there. And then all of a sudden, this incredibly frightening tall man stands behind her and starts to come into the screen. And he is
the tallest dude you've ever seen.
Terrifying. Well, the actor that played this character is called Mike Lanier, and he was 7'7". He was a basketball player for and one half of the world's tallest twins.
Wow.
So he's a twin.
Yikes, Mom.
He also worked as an engine designer for General Motors in Detroit, which is where the movie was filmed, which is why he was cast.
Oh, wow.
Sadly, he passed away in 2018.
Oh,
but
rest
he did
in peace,
get to
Big
see
King.
himself as this scary tall man.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, sorry to hear of his passing. He is, when I think of It Follows, the first thing I think of.
Yeah.
That scene is, it's a top one for me. It's absolutely heart-stopping.
Well, there's another scene, too, in the barn when they're on that beach property where they first get approached by a Yara lookalike. That's the one that grabs her hair essentially, and they run and they block themselves into this barn. And they see this tall man walking by again and kicking a hole in the barn, but it's too small of an entry for him. And then this weird, like, monstery child crawls through that hole. So not only is the entity able to take on different forms, but it adapts to get to the person, which is also super scary because you never know if the person walking up on you is the entity or not.
I really want to call out something you said right at the beginning, because I agree with you 1,000%. Is one of the best elements of this movie is they don't tell you shit about this demon.
Yeah.
You don't know it. They just tell you like a couple of rules so you understand what's going on and enough to be afraid of it.
But we don't even know if those rules are true because Hugh, when she does go
Exactly.
to confront Hugh, he's like, it's still following me.
It's not like
I still see it. Maybe it's not so active. Maybe it's waiting.
so many horror movies have like a group of teenagers digging up an ancient book in Latin.
Yeah,
or some
so quick
shit.
for them to solve the problems.
I know,
of the world.
exactly. And this movie really is authentic in that it's basically like, well, how would a group of average dipshits at this age survive?
And
which
that's
is
what we
barely,
see
if at all.
in the pool scene. So they go to this pool. They come up with this really elaborate plan, only that kids can do. I mean, young adults, they're like 19, 20.
Yeah. All your ideas are brilliant, except they're not.
They go to this pool. They plug in a bunch of appliances around the edge of the pool. Micah Monroe gets in the pool to lure the entity into the water. And who shows up as the entity this time? Her father. And we only know this because of the one photograph that we see, that he's not present in the film at all. So he shows up and he starts to pick up the electronics and throw them in the pool.
Yep.
And they end up shooting at him, and terrible shot. They're terrible shots. They shoot Yara in the leg.
They're terrified.
Paul is the one. They're scared.
Yeah.
They don't know what to do. They throw a blanket over him. They shoot him.
It's
he
like
goes in the water. He grabs her leg and tries
like when
to
a wild
yank her
animal
down.
runs into a room and a bunch of regular kids like try to figure out what to do
it's
about
a mess.
it.
It's a mess.
It's a mess. It's a total mess.
And so they finally end up, Paul ends up shooting the entity in the water multiple times and through the head. And Micah gets out, and then all of this blood starts to appear, spread out, and then contract. And then they change scene. And then she has sex with Paul. And then Paul finds a prostitute and has sex with the prostitute, allegedly. I mean, they don't show it. And then Micah, character Jay, and Paul are walking down the street hand in hand. And then somebody comes up, starts to slowly come up behind them. And that's how the film ends.
It could be anybody.
And then the title
I know.
comes on.
It's so... Co-host, beloved co-host, may I say, and not for the first time, you have impeccable taste.
I mean, it's a really great, it really does, just like this entity, it sort of follows you and gets under your skin. And that's part of it. You know, I just listened to another podcast.
You what?
I know. It's a pop culture podcast, and I've been listening for years. And one of the hosts went to see Talk to Me.
I'm dying to see that movie. She has
the opposite taste of me in as far as horror.
Yeah.
She likes the resolved quick scare monster.
Sure.
The monster is.
Yeah.
She said this was so hard because it attaches to you, and
that's what I've heard about it
with you. And you actually have to confront, real adult themes here, which is also here. You have to confront your own morality as you decide, if I'm going to give this to someone else.
Yeah.
You have to try to kill this entity that can't be killed.
It's very hard to judge these characters because they're just regular people confronted with something extraordinary.
And what would you do? Also, it asks the question, what would you do in that situation?
Exactly.
Because once you have it, it seems like it's always going to follow you, that you can't outrun it.
It's very easy to be moral when you're not carrying around a sex curse that is 7'7".
I mean, she goes on this boat at one point and has sex with 3 guys. They don't show it, but that's what happened. But even still, it's following her.
Yeah.
So
it's tearing through town as fast as she is.
It's sort of like you're passing it around to all these people that eventually, how could it not come back around?
Honestly,
that's the other thing.
The closest.
How could it not come back around to you?
The closest
what
analogy
happens then?
I have to this movie is Kids.
Yeah. Oh man.
The Rosario Dawson's debut.
Know.
Yeah. Because it's the same element of, by the end of the movie, it's literally come fucking full circle, and he's infecting people in his own friend group.
Right.
Oh gosh, I am so happy you chose this movie. I would like to ask you real quickly about the first time you saw it. Were you with anyone in particular, anyone special?
I'm sure I was with the beloved co-host.
Are you sure?
I mean, who else would I have seen it with?
Me.
Yeah, we were successfully married.
Yeah. Yes, after many unsuccessful attempts that ended in bloodbaths.
We probably saw it at the ArcLight.
Definitely at the ArcLight. Yeah.
I don't know.
R.I.P. ArcLight.
Yeah.
Miss you. Even though you were super expensive.
It was totally worth it.
Oh, worth it. Absolutely. ArcLight. Anyway, this has been my favorite horror movie. And beloved co-host, I loved what you had to say about your movie. And I love your choice. And I love your taste. And I love you.
And I watched The Exorcist with you.
You did.
Many years later,
yes.
After we've been together a while.
You had a completely different experience because you were an adult and not religious. And
I did still think it was scary.
That makes me happy. Because it is.
And, join us for our next My Favorite Horror when we remake an episode and talk about another one of our favorite horror, because we're not going to be able to choose just one.
No.
Sorry.
We can't. The only thing that we can choose one of is each other.
Oh, that's sweet.
Love it.
Pea souping everywhere.
Oh, God. Raw eggs.
Bye.
Hey, beloved listener. This is Richard, as you could probably tell from the sound of my voice. Just wanted to quickly say that we recorded this episode before news broke yesterday of the passing of William Friedkin at the age of 87. And we here just at Tandem wanted to give a special shout out to William Friedkin, one of my favorite directors of all time. He was a very complicated man by all accounts, but cannot deny the quality of his body of work. Everything from The French Connection to, of course, The Exorcist, To Live and Die in L.A., and even some of his more recent work he continued directing late in life with movies like Bug and the incredible Killer Joe starring Matthew McConaughey that I really recommend. Anyway, it's definitely a loss for the filmmaking community, for the audience, and we just wanted to take a second or two to give our best to the family and friends of William Friedkin and to mourn his passing and celebrate the life and works of one of the greatest American directors of all time.
Terror in Tandem is written, produced, and recorded by Laura and Richard Mathiasen, and edited and mixed by Richard Mathiasen. Our theme was written and performed by Carrie Denver, and all other music was written and performed by David Hispanic. All opinions expressed on this podcast are our own and should be taken as such. Thanks for listening, and please remember to give us a like, a review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. See you next time. We're still